Welcome back, everybody. And it's time to go outside and do something a little more creative. Let's think about a composition that's horizontal now and take several photographs, walk around, go to the lake, take a drive, and see what you can find out there that's interesting. With the landscape, what you'll find is the proportions and likeness don't really matter so much, but you want a convincing sense of space, going back into space. One of the things that I've noticed about great landscape art is that there's often a diagonal that will take you back into space, like a road that goes back, and sometimes it even cuts back another direction, and then even a third. So we're going back into space as we go. Maybe there's some trees that are smaller here, trees that are a little bit larger here, and then large trees that are in the foreground to kind of separate that kind of space. What you want to avoid is something that is totally flat. You don't want to do just the front side of a building. So whatever you can do to get that sense of space. Also, smaller lines in the deep space, medium lines in the middle ground, and then bigger, thicker lines in the foreground can also help. Now, this is just sort of stylistic design here as far as I'm concerned. Now, another thing that I've noticed in good landscape is that it is an awful lot like a circus feeling in terms of light. And that may not make much sense, especially if you haven't ever been to a circus. But often in a circus, you're going to be sitting, like in a basketball game, in the stands here, and you won't have harsh light on you. And then on the other side of the event, basketball court or circus arena, you'll have another group that's in the shadows. And in the middle ground is where the light is. So thinking about light coming in and illuminating sort of this middle ground area might be an interesting design technique where you have more darker values in the deep space and darker values, almost like shade, in the foreground. Now, this probably doesn't look like much, and it isn't much. It's just a way for me to describe how you might set up space. Diagonals, line width, shadow to light to shadow, those sorts of things would be things to look for. So avoid flat, avoid all the same kind of line, and avoid all the same kind of value. So those are three things that are really important. Okay, now I've done some of this, and I'm not going to go into great detail about how to carve this. This is going to be just like working around a serif, the tail of the Q, just whatever it is, ascenders and descenders like we've done before, or like you've worked with your hair or with a shape of your chin from the portrait. This will just be another image. But I'm going to show you a couple examples that may help you see how to put this together. Now, this print is from a woodcut, and it's the same as relief. It's a little bit harder to cut into, but you can see that I've got some of the things I was talking about. I've got this diagonal going back. I've got more shadow maybe here. Not a big change in light as we go back. And also I've got descending sizes so that the ships over here, their sails are very small compared to the boats and the ships that are up in this area. So that helps. And then when we do our sky, this is from our value assignment that we did earlier. You don't just have empty white, that would be boring. But how do you separate those different forms of the clouds and the clear sky? Maybe some light cirrus clouds there in the background. So, you have some open spaces, some white, something that's close to a 2 or a 1. And then by changing the angle of the lines, that's what changes this, not so much with value, but with a line that we can kind of see that there's a cloud in here, and then there's more still sky right in here. And then when we get down to the water line, this is more like the 8s and 9s of our value assignment, where I've got very small lines and they're running horizontally to make that flat plane of the water surface, meeting with the vertical lines where we run into the buildings here. Now, you may not be interested in the geometry so much. This was actually part of a big project I did, and my research took me to Venice, and I was actually in Venice looking at designs from Visentini, who was the etcher. He made prints based on Canaletto paintings. And so I was trying to put myself in the same position and doing the same drawings. So you'll do the same thing. I would like for you to do a drawing and see how your hand makes a line, makes a mark, and then translate that into your print. Now, this also led me to other things. So you may think that printmaking is maybe not totally your bag, but what I did was I was trying to figure out how I could turn this into a children's book. And about 3 dogs that went to Venice and they were looking for a place to live. And so I put together this mock-up book, this sample book, and I was using some of the prints in the background and trying to use the graphic quality of printmaking to make this come about. And you can see that this is the print that is from here. So you never know where printmaking is going to take you, and maybe this will come off into some other project or not. But this is just an example of how I sort of got interested in working with a children's book using this printmaking technique. Now, you may not want to go into as much detail as I've done here, and I understand that. So here we have, this is just a simpler print of my house. So here's that diagonal going in, and then I've got these gables, and they get a little smaller as you go up. And then I've got these longer lines here, maybe some shorter lines here. And then I've got the dark and the light interspersed. So I've got the trees growing out in front of where the moon is coming up over the house. And I'm also trying to vary my lines. So I have large lines here on the steps, a little bit smaller here on the sidewalk, curving lines for this bush, maybe a little bit straighter lines for these 2 coniferous trees that are beside it, and just trying to break up lines: horizontal, vertical, horizontal, diagonal, light, dark, diagonal, horizontal, so on and so on. So you may try something a little more modest like this. I don't expect anybody to do a large 22 by 30 print. So do some research, do some sketches, come up with your research examples, transfer your drawings to the linoleum. Remember, everything's going to be reversed. Carve it out carefully using your bench hook, and let's see what you end up with, and have fun with the landscape. All right, I'll see you next time.